Thank you very much for your report. The next speaker will be from France, but first the word would goes to the director of the Russian Center of Science and Culture in Paris, and he will introduce the speaker more detailed. Thank you. Good day, dear colleagues. From France, I would thank the Russian Center in Copenhagen for such initiative, and today, especially for the Day of Science in Russia, it's very important to have such a discussion. Today's conference opened up a series of different discussions of different conferences from the Russian centers all over Europe. It's very important that today we discuss scientific view and expertise opinion on the COVID-19. And now we talk with Professor Filippo Letti.
Good afternoon.
Who is located in the center of the problematic in France, and highly respected expert.
France Biotech, а также основателем и председателем совета директоров французской компании Abivax.
The chairman of Abivax.
В области биотехнологии входят клинические исследования. Специалисты компании изучают иммунную систему в поиске новых методов лечения воспалительных и вирусных заболеваний и рака. Abivax наш сосед, он находится в Париже, но также компания сотрудничает с крупнейшего государственного научного учреждения во Франции, Национального научно-исследовательского центра СНРС Монпелье. Кроме того, французские эксперты...
Abivax works with the national French
который без малого 20 лет успешно финансирует во Франции и Европе наиболее многообещающие инновации в сфере науки и информационных технологий. Магистерскую диссертацию он защитил в Пастеровском институте.
Filippo defended his master dissertation in immunology and virology in the Pasteur University and registered 32 different patents. Apart from the speaker from France, there are several other specialists who are deeply interested in the subject. Moreover, there will be also French doctors. So the floor is open to Filippo Polizzi.
Thank you, Mr. Volkov, and I'm pleased to see that I can understand a few Russian words like Montpellier and Abivax and Pasteur. As a former chairman of France Biotech and CEO of Truffle Capital and chairman of Abivax, thank you for the honor to talk to this group. So I'd like to talk about the biotech and vaccine situation in France, in Europe and the rest of the world, how things might evolve, also talk about treatments, which we don't talk about as much as about vaccines, and which in my mind is also a very important topic, and to see what kind of cooperation we could set up with Russia on this pandemic. So for vaccine and France, certainly France has a long-standing position in vaccines with Sanofi, with Pasteur Institute, and what could say we are somewhat disappointed that the Sanofi vaccine so far has not made it to the clinical threshold of efficacy. We are also disappointed that the vaccine candidates from Pasteur Institute using missile vector has not so far worked. On the other hand, we could say we are very pleased that Stéphane Bancel, who is the CEO of Moderna, was raised and done most of his career first in France. So France is part of somewhat of the success. But as we all know, companies which have made it today, does not mean that other vaccine candidates, other companies will not come to successful results within the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and that given the worldwide needs and the unknown on duration of protection by the current vaccines, whether antibody protection and or cellular immunity will be important, and how things will play along with existing and future mutants, I think no one can claim today to have the winning vaccine or solution, and that certainly to have 5, 10, or 15 vaccines well tested in clinical trials and approved by regulatory agencies and manufactured at the highest standard will be needed in the months and years to come. And it's likely that we'll have to live with this virus and its mutants for many, many years. And we'll have to see whether one vaccine will last for several months or years, or whether we'll have to revaccinate people over and over, depending on mutants or duration of immunity. So we have to accept that a lot of things are unknown. And I know it's very difficult to some of my colleagues and I to say we don't know, but on most of these questions, we should be honest and say we still don't know, and we have to continue very heavily research with open minds. With respect to the situation of vaccination in France, currently 2.75% of French have been vaccinated, which is not on the high side. It's pretty similar to the level in Germany, and certainly far below the US, which is almost at 10%, and far below the UK, which is at 17%. So why is this situation, which on my part, as an immunologist, I'm really not happy with? First reason is in some countries, and especially in France, there is an attitude from the general public against vaccines because there is a low level of scientific education, of medical education, and in the past, when there were vaccines like hepatitis B vaccine, papillomavirus vaccines, which provides a major benefit, scientific and medical benefit, well, sometimes you had a side effect which was not attributed to the vaccines, but where the media said, oh, this person got this disease and he was also vaccinated, so the vaccine is toxic. And that has been extremely detrimental to the receptivity of the general public to novel vaccines. And there is
И видит определенную реакцию населения, негативной реакции к вакцине. Мы должны понимать, какие у тебя есть риски, если тебе 75 лет и у тебя есть диабет. И риск тяжелой формы перенесения COVID-19.
Reaction to any vaccines. Such an anaphylactic reaction, by the way, can be most of the time very easily treated. So education is the key to acceptance of vaccines. But if I had been Minister of Health in France, and of course it's always easier to say that's what you should do, I would have made vaccination mandatory for elderly and for high-risk patients, because you cannot ask his opinion, to patients or their family to say, we'd like you to think about it, should you get the vaccine or not, because the consequences of refusal to get a vaccine by these people means detrimental health for themselves, but also high risk for their parents, for their sibling, for people in the street. So why didn't the government make that mandatory? Two reasons. Why? One, being a little shy of, gee, if I make that mandatory and one day there is a judge saying that there was an adverse event related to mandatory vaccine, as a politician, as a former minister, could I be in court penalized by this decision? So politicians do not always have the courage of saying, when you are in a war, you need to make decisions. Second reason was that there was not enough supply of vaccines in any event. So if the vaccine would have been made mandatory for elderly and high-risk group in any event, things would not have gone much faster. I still believe that in the future, governments will make vaccines mandatory for certain high-risk group, because you'll always have people resistant to vaccination, and our healthcare system and our society cannot afford many people to say, no, I don't want to be a vaccine, if we think as a society that vaccine is for the best of everyone. So I think we'll see mandatory approaches, especially when there are enough supplies. The other reason of the low rate of vaccination in France certainly are the fact, and you already discussed that Europe was a little slow in saying we need to negotiate now the orders, like the US did early, like the UK, thanks to Brexit. It's the only positive thing I would say about Brexit, would say, well, we are free to go and negotiate our vaccine supply independently of Europe. So I wish Europe would have been a little proactive, but all over the COVID history in the last year, Europe was a little slow. We didn't have one European scientific committee like there was in the US, which collectively for Europe could dictate the guidelines of new diagnostic tests, new vaccines, new treatment Europe would need. We cannot say that the European Bank of Investment was extremely proactive to identify companies which would need financial support to speed up their R&D. In fact, European Bank of Investment was more like, well, this is the human resources I have today. I have too many requests, too many projects. Sorry, we cannot deal with all of these requests from biotech companies all over Europe. There was also the lesson that for clinical trials, it is abnormal to have to deal with the French regulatory, with the German, with the Spanish, with the Italian, with the Belgium, each one at a time to start a clinical trial in Europe. In the US, FDA says you can do your trial, you do it all over Europe. Why would a company need the opinion of each regulatory agency for each European country before saying we start the trial? This is a waste of energy.
Но, к сожалению, очень много сил и времени было потрачено на нахождение путей внутри Европейского Союза, где каждая страна должна была вести и начать свои тесты.
President Macron and the French government, there are a number of pharmaceutical suppliers.
И сейчас во Франции, заслугам Макрона, находится несколько фармацевтических компаний, которые работают с разработкой вакцины. Такие компании, как Dalton, Crescent, будут работать с Pfizer и с Moderna, чтобы ускорить производство вакцин для
will start in March for Delphin, for Recipharm, and in May for Fareva. And Sanofi will also put its manufacturing facilities of Mayence in Germany to work for the Pfizer BioNTech. And we'll have the sites of Vitry-sur-Seine and Marcy-l'Étoile for the future Sanofi vaccine. I'd like to talk just a minute of the Sputnik 5 vaccine. Congratulations. And of course, we will be very interested to know more about the manufacturing data, the quality assurance data. But at the head of Truffle Capital, I'm saying if you'd like to talk about how we could cooperate to make the Sputnik 5 vaccine also a European or international.
Сейчас очень важно говорить о том, как мы можем сделать вакцину спутника такой же европейской, как все остальные.
Let me now switch to treatment. For many viral disease, there is no vaccines, like HIV, cytomegalovirus, hepatitis C virus, herpes virus. Despite that, treatment, drugs which will decrease replication of the virus or which will decrease the consequences on the patients of viral infection, treatment have been extremely efficient. For HIV, if patients do not die anymore, very rarely, it's because drugs have been developed to treat HIV positive patients. The same for hepatitis C. Despite that, there was less efforts on developing treatment. There was also, of course, a lot of false claims from very small early studies saying, oh, there is a miracle drug, hydroxychloroquine, who is going to treat patients and so on. And unfortunately, these claims were very damaging to the rigorous science and clinical development of new treatments. But yes, we will have treatment, and as head of Abivax, which has been working on...
Самое главное еще разработать помимо вакцины методы лечения ковида. И как со стороны Abivax мы сейчас проводим большие клинические исследования. Я все равно очень оптимистически настроена на то, что мы сможем найти новые пути лечения. Кандидаты исследования работают на несколько различных реакций.
Plays a key role at the level of the lungs, which make the lungs and CO2. So you have this excess inflammatory reaction, which is...
Пациенты с летальным исходом ковида имеют определенную реакцию между заражением легких, которое мы можем сейчас отслеживать, и понять, как именно можно это предостановить на ранних стадиях.
Like IL-6, which is only one element of the inflammatory reaction, which involves many cytokines and many cells of the immune and inflammatory system. So you need to be able to treat as early as possible following diagnosis of COVID-19 so that you are going to prevent the emergence of this inflammatory reaction and the fact that in some patients you evolve towards respiratory distress. You need also to be able to the medium and long-term consequences
Что очень важно, нужно найти пути, как предотвратить последствия после после перенесения COVID-19. Где медикаменты будут очень
viral effect, which was proven in a very stringent human respiratory model in Lyon. And the third benefit is that it promotes tissue repair. So how do we know that about ABX464? It's because this drug has been developed for other severe inflammatory disease, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, which are intestine diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, joint disease, and also other inflammatory disease. And we have more than 700 patients treated with ABX464 for these other diseases. Very good safety, very good results on inflammation.
И сейчас мы уже наблюдаем довольно хорошие результаты тех исследований, которые мы проводим. Однако, но мы точно не можем утверждать, что он точно работает с COVID-19, но с другими вирусными инфекциями, респираторными вирусными инфекциями. Сейчас мы проводим плацебо-исследование.
And the recruitment is speeding up. So we should know by the end of March or April whether or not the drug is efficacious. And there is one big benefit is that it's a small molecule which can be taken as a small capsule or tablet orally once a day. So it's easy to manufacture, easy to scale up, and easy to prescribe and administer to patients with a very good safety profile. So if the results of the so-called MIRAGE trial are positive, Abivax will be in a position to very rapidly scale up manufacturing. In fact, we have started to scale up manufacturing with several subcontractors so that we should be able in 2021 to manufacture several million doses if the results of the trial are positive, and possibly tens of millions of doses later on at a very reasonable cost of goods. So despite the fact that we are very prudent on potential efficacy or no efficacy of the drug, we have decided, with the support of the French government, of a BPI, CGI, which is the largest financial grant to a small biotech company, 36 million euros, to scale up manufacturing before the results of the trial, so that if the trial is positive, we could see regulatory approval by June or July and get emergency approval in Europe and other countries by Q3 of 2021. Of course, ABX464 is not only the drug candidate, and it's very good. Multiple biotech companies are working on monoclonal antibodies, polyclonal antibodies, other viral products, repositioning of existing drugs which are approved for other indications but which might have an antiviral effect. Now, for example, Pharnext is a company working on repositioning of existing drugs, and collectively with this world effort, we'll have not only vaccines, but treatment. For treatment, as I said in the beginning, the benefit risk profile is very different than for a vaccine. For a vaccine, you need very high safety and vaccinate 40, 50, 60% of the world population, especially the high-risk patients. For a treatment, you have to treat 0.1% or maximum 1% of this number were the patients who will be positive with the viral infection. So my personal dream as a citizen is that no one will ever need the ABX464 from Abivax or other treatment, because vaccines will be fully effective, distributed, and the virus disappears. But realistically, I'm saying that yes, collectively we have to work very hard on both vaccines and treatment. So I'd like to stop here and answer your questions, but finish again to say to my colleagues on this call, would you want to talk on collaborations either on ABX464, on the trial or manufacturing or supply, or on Sputnik 5 and how we could make it faster, quicker, a vaccine which is available in Europe and elsewhere at your disposal.
Спасибо большое, Филипп. Коллеги, прежде всего, наши коллеги из института
Thank you very much. And now I would address the colleagues from the Ministry of Health in Russia if they have any questions to work.
Пожалуйста, Филипп готов ответить на ваши вопросы. Или кто-то хочет, может быть, сгруппировать, составить это в письменном виде? Коллеги, слышно?
Hello.
Да-да, пожалуйста, Оливье.
Olivier, yeah, thank you for invitation. I think it's
Спасибо большое за приглашение. Я думаю, что
I think it's very important to focus our conference, your conference, on the Sputnik, because the time is precious. I'm not a scientist. I'm an orthopedic surgeon for children and adolescents, but for me, the Sputnik vaccine is really a gift, an opportunity for the world, because it's one of the most effective, less expensive, and easier to use. Stored in a simple fridge and used everywhere, if I understand well, especially by general practitioners. 91% effectiveness is really extraordinary. The few side effects are very interesting. And I have to say that Europe should be able to use this Sputnik as quickly as possible, especially in this period of shortage. I think the new RNA messenger vaccines are probably very promising for many diseases, but the condition of manufacture and use are an obstacle for mass vaccination, as in France and everywhere. For me, all weapons are good to take, and Russia is giving us really, I think, a gift. Really, I think we want a real close collaboration between Russia and Europe, and in particular France. It's imperative. This collaboration effectively exists in the conquest of space. And Sputnik is much more than an historical symbol. We have a common history for centuries and a special affection between our peoples, with an obvious sharing in the fields of art and literature.